Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about slope of a line. We're going to be on pages 188 and 189. That was a pretty good rhyme, if you ask me. So we're going to start on the top of page 188. So we've got Ashwini's family is getting ready for the local Holi festival. Ashwini mixes yellow and red food coloring to make orange food coloring. And then this is the graph that kind of explains how much of each to make that orange food coloring. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find the slope of the line. So there's a couple different ways we can do that. So the way that I like to do it, especially with proportional relationships, is the first thing I look at is like for the number 1 as my x value. But it doesn't really cross at a perfect point, so that's not going to be helpful for us. So then the second thing I do is I look for points that cross at perfect spots. So like 0, 0, when it's proportional, I know is going to be a good point. And then I kind of follow my line and I find where it crosses another perfect point, which looks like maybe right there. All right. So then the other day we talked about vertical change. How much does it go up? So if I go from 0 up to 4, the vertical change goes on top. That change in y goes on top of my fraction. And then my change in x goes on the bottom. So I have to go out from 0 all the way to halfway between 8 and 12, which is 10. So my slope is going to be 4 over 10, but we should write that a little bit in simplified form. So we would say 2/5. All right, so that just means for every 2 ounces of red coloring, she needs 5 ounces of yellow. Okay. All right. So then let's go to the next part. You can use the quotient, a vertical change and horizontal change. That's what we just did. And then the thing is, like, you can use any 2 points. Okay, so for instance, we used these 2 here in our first example up here, but now the book's using these 2. Well, you'll notice that the vertical change is still 4, the horizontal change is still 10, and when we reduce that, it's going to be 2/5. So it doesn't matter really which 2 points you use, you're always going to get the same thing. For example, you could even use 0, 0, and this point way out here, 28. If you do that, your vertical change is going to go from 0 to 8, so that would be 8 over, and then our horizontal change goes from 0 to 20, so that would be 8 over 20, which if you divide both of those by 4, that's going to be 2 over 5. So it really doesn't matter which 2 points you choose, as long as you're choosing points that fall on like a perfect plus, okay, where grid lines come together. Otherwise, we can't be super accurate with those. All right. So now we're going to get introduced to what we call slope formula. Okay? This is going to be something that you're going to want to memorize, and I know it looks scary. It looks like it's going to be crazy hard, but it really isn't. Okay? So we know that points are made up of an x and a y, an x and a y. When we're trying to find slope, we need 2 points. Okay, so we just choose 2 of those points, and we label them. Our first point, we label x sub 1 and y sub 1. And then our second point, we label x sub 2 and y sub 2. And then all we have to do is take those numbers and put them in these spots. So for instance, if these are my 2 points here, I'm going to call this x sub 1 and y sub 1, because those are made up of an x and a y. Then I'm going to label these ones x sub 2 and y sub 2, because those are my second points, but they're still x and y. Now all I need to do is take those and plug these in. So my y sub 2 goes first. That's why my 8 is here. You keep the minus from the formula, that's why this minus is here, and then you put your y sub 1 next. My y sub 1 was 4, so that's why the top part of my fraction is 8 minus 4. Then on the bottom, I've got x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So my x sub 2 goes first, which is 20. Keep the minus from the formula, and then my x sub 1 is 10, so that goes there at the end. And then you just solve that, okay? So you would say 8 minus 4 is 4, and then 20 minus 10 is 10, and look at that. That should look very familiar because our slope should be 2 over 5 for that line. Okay? Perfect. Let's go to the next page, and let's just answer some questions about those things. So, use the problem from the previous page to help us understand. So, what is the slope of the line in the triad section? Well, we figured it out multiple times, right? So, it was 2/5. And why is it helpful? Well, it's helpful because it tells you the number of ounces of red you need to mix with each ounce of yellow. Okay? So it helps us because, you know, if you're making a bigger batch, you might say, well, I need 4 ounces of red for every 10 ounces of yellow. It just gives us that ratio, okay, that unit rate of what we need. All right, so use the quotient representing slope to explain why the slope formula makes sense. So the quotient is just that y over x, that 2/5, or sometimes we had like that 4 over 10. Well, it makes sense because if we look at our vertical change on the opposite sides, it's 4 over 10, which is the same thing we got when we did this problem down here, where this top part is our change in y's, and our y's are our vertical change. So that's why our vertical change was 4, and then our horizontal change was 10. So it's kind of all the same thing. Vertical change, horizontal change, and the slope formula are really kind of the same thing. Okay, because we're just finding the change in y over change in x. So it says find the slope of the line using 2 other pairs of points. Explain why you get the same value for the slope no matter which points you choose on the line. Well, since we already did some other points over here, let's just talk about this one. You know, we started off by using these 2 points, 0, 0, and 10, 4. And when we did the vertical change over the horizontal change, we got 4 over 10. Okay? And then we saw that the book used these 2 points, and they got the same thing, 4 over 10. And then we used these 2 points, 0, 0, and 28. And we still got the same thing. We had 8 over 20, which reduced to 2 over 5. So why do we get the same thing every single time? Well, the reason why is because the slope is always the same. So the slope is the same. So we'll say the slope is constant. Let's say that. It has a constant rate of change. Okay? What that also means is that this is a straight line. Okay? All right. And then number 4 talks about how do we decide which points to use? The points that you should use fall perfectly on grid lines. Okay? They have to fall perfectly because you can't be totally accurate if they're not perfectly on those grid lines. Okay? So the main point of today is, again, knowing that y over x, or the change in y over the change in x, gets you your slope, and then the slope formula right here. We're going to be working with that quite a bit moving forward. But that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching.